Just a wee reminder that this is actually being recorded and it will be put on, probably put on YouTube, same as last year's one was as well. If people could keep their microphones muted, just to stop any stray noises coming in during the presentation, that would be great. But please do feel free to put questions in the chat. And at the end of the session, we will have a question and answer session. So you can, if you can't put questions in the chat, we'll open it up for any questions then. So I'll just introduce myself. Go to the next slide. I'm Susan Osbeck and I'm the current chair of the Unlock Our Future Fund panel. So the panel, as we were saying a bit earlier, from a wide area across Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, and we're the ones that look through all the applications and decide whether they meet the fund priorities and decide on, recommend which ones should be funded. Also with me tonight is Bea Jefferson, who many of you may have already spoken to from Foundation Scotland, and she is the Community Funds Advisor. So she's the one that does all the technical assessment of the project. And we've also have got Cheryl Croydon with us tonight, who is from the Fitty Community Development Trust, and Cheryl's going to give her experiences of being an applicant, both successful and unsuccessful at one point. So go to the next slide, please. So the Unlock Our Future Fund is provided by Vattenfall. The aim is it supports projects in the Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire area that contribute towards a climate smart future. And this comes about because of the offshore wind farm that's in Aberdeen. It contributes, Vattenfall puts in £150,000 per year, and the fund, every year for the lifetime of the farm, and that's expected to be at least 20 years. 10% of that fund is set aside for projects that are specifically in Black Dog, because Black Dog's where the cables land on, that's where the landfall is, and the substation is also hosted in Black Dog. So as part of, when the fund was originally set up, because this is now in our 4th year of the fund, when it was originally set up, there was a public consultation into what the priorities should be. And so we have 4 priorities, which Bea will go into a bit more depth later, but I'll just introduce them just now. Ideally, we would like the projects to meet at least 3 of the criteria, and obviously the stronger projects would probably be able to meet all 4 of the criteria. So we're looking for projects that contribute to a climate smarter world, that invest in community facilities or activities that are environmentally sustainable. We're looking for things that support creative solutions. Previously that was known as innovative, but we're just looking for different ways of solving problems or meeting needs in the area. And the project should ensure that there's a lasting legacy, so that the actual impact of the project goes beyond when the project is just carried out. So we're looking for longer benefits to the local community. So here are some examples of our previous recipients. So we've funded a wide variety of different projects. So we've got on the top there, we have funded an electric vehicle for going around Meldrum, that for looking after all the planters in the area, keeping the area, everything watered during the summer. So that's an electric powered vehicle, and it's also solar powered to actually charge the battery. We funded things like e-cargo bikes, so they're for the Seafine there, where they are delivering food supplies to people in need. So the food bank that actually takes the food and other goods to people in need. We've also we have funded quite a few solar panels. In this case, this is on boathouse for we've funded a sailing a boat that's instead of it being a diesel motor, it's actually an electric motor. And we've also funded things like sustainable lighting, so low energy lighting for the barn, which is creative theatre space. So there is a wide variety of projects that we've funded. This is last year we also funded quite a few smaller grants. Bea will explain that there are two different types of grants. So last year it was the first time we've managed to award a few smaller grants as well. So that's also very good, and we're quite glad to see some of the smaller applications coming in as well. So I'm going to hand over to Bea, who is going to explain a bit more in detail about how to actually go about applying to the fund.
Thank you, Susan. So I'll go through a little bit more detail about how to apply. If you've got any questions at all, just drop them in the chat, or else we'll have a bit of time at the end, questions and answers. Or if it's something very specific to your project, just get in touch with me and we can discuss it. Book a meeting in my diary if you want a bit more time to go through something. So the application process, there are two levels of grants. They're the small grants under £2,000 and the large grants between 2,000 and 15,000 for 1 year, or potentially up to 30,000 for 3 years. The small grants has a slightly more streamlined process that I'll go into in a bit, so it's slightly quicker and easier, and you need to provide less information. The large grants, it's a two-stage process that involves shortlisting and a more detailed assessment. Now, I have had some questions about the upper limits on these grants, particularly in terms of repeat applications and the number of years that are being applied for. Repeat applications are possible. Now, the one thing the panel has been discussing is, well, how does that fit in with this desire to only fund up to 3 years with £30,000? Because we have had a number of projects that have applied initially for 15,000 and then have come back again for another 15,000 or more. Now, the panel has decided that generally, if you're applying a second time for the same project, they're likely to cap the amount at 30,000 in all, however many times you come back for the same project. If it's a group applying for a different project, you can still get the maximum. However, the fund is oversubscribed, so the panel might decide to prioritise organisations that haven't had money before. I also had the question that from somebody that they want a grant that's for an item that's going to cost more than 15. So the question was, well, can we treat it as funded over 2 years? And my response to that is, well, firstly, it's the panel who make the decision, not me. But if it's activity that's being delivered over 2 years or being phased over 2 years, yes, you could take the limits over 2 years. But if it's a rather sort of artificial splitting into 2 years in order to raise the application level, the panel are probably unlikely to approve that. So again, please come and talk to me about it so I understand more about the project and why the split over 2 years is being proposed on that. So there are these two levels of grant with different levels of detail, slightly different processes. The eligibility for funding. Applicants need to be community organisations, so they've got to have purposes that are for the benefit of the community. They don't have to be registered charities, as long as the purposes are generally charitable in nature. Foundation Scotland have a certain eligibility criteria which we apply that include things like having a constitution, having a minimum number of trustees, having a bank account. And there's a lot more detail on the website about those minimum eligibility criteria that aren't a problem for most organisations. They're pretty standard for applying for a lot of sources of funding. One exclusion I just want to raise, because it has cropped up in this fund before, is that we're actually not allowed to fund religious activity. So if you are applying from a religious group, we can't fund things like improvements to buildings where the primary purpose of that building is religious worship. However, if the purpose of the building is community activity, yes, we can fund it. So if we have a church with a church hall attached and the church hall is open to the wider community, used by the wider community, it would be absolutely fine to fund improvements to the church hall, but not the actual church building itself. So if you're applying from a religious organisation, much before submitting your application, because we'll just want to make sure it's in the application that your project is open to the wider community. So the fund is now open. Close date is the end of April. You can make a start on the application at any time you want. But before you apply, please go on to the Foundation Scotland website and read the guidance. If you need help, there is quite a lot of help out there. So please discuss your application with me. I can have a look at draft applications. That's not a problem at all. And I can let you know if anything is unclear in your application. Other organisations are out there that can provide help. So people such as Local Energy Scotland, if your project includes renewables, they can be a great help. There's also services available from what's now called Business Energy Scotland. So in the past, if people were applying for improvements to buildings, we'll say, please go to Zero Waste Scotland and get a free energy assessment from them. The contract that Zero Waste Scotland has now been passed over to the Energy Saving Trust, and they're calling it Business Energy Scotland. Now, the contract transferred on 1st of April, so unfortunately there's been a bit of a pause in actually doing these energy assessments, which is a shame because it's really bad timing for these applications. Because if you're applying for work on a building, the free assessments done through this are really, really helpful if you're putting together an application, because they can provide independent advice on what sort of approach is going to work best for your building, what the costs, what the benefits might be. It actually makes putting in an application really, really easy. But there is this pause, and I'm not exactly sure what the timescale is at the moment for getting these energy assessments from Business Energy Scotland. Now, usually we'll say, please get one of these assessments before you put in an application, but because of the timescales, if you haven't been able to do it and you are having an application put together for work on a building, just explain in your application that that's the case, but try to get one before we get to the assessment process, and then you've got some backing evidence there for when we do the assessment of the grant. There's also a lot of support available through TSIs, third sector interface organisations. So particularly for things like other funding sources, work on your governance, they can be a really good source of support in that if you find that when you're putting together your application, there are areas you think need strengthening. Also the rural partnerships, they have teams who can actually help with supporting. So there are sources of support out there, but please come and talk to me about your application. And if there are particular issues, I can probably help signpost to particular areas of support. The form to fill in is online. Last year was the first year we had online forms only. Before that, we used to have various options, different formats. And we found that the online form has actually worked reasonably well. We haven't had too many problems reported with it. And it works a lot better for us than previous versions of things like Word forms, partly because I can actually see drafts. When you put the draft on our system, I can actually go in and read it. And that makes it a lot easier if you want to get my advice while it's still at a draft stage, because I can just go in and read what's been written so far. Also, it saves risks of forms getting lost in email, post, whatever, which has happened in the past. So that's really helpful for us. So it's an online form. You just go onto the web page for the Unlock Our Future Fund, click the button, and it'll ask you to register. And there are a series of eligibility questions before you actually start on it. Please excuse me for the odd pause. So the process, for small grants, it's a simpler process and a quicker decision. So it's a slightly shorter form, and the decision's made in June. And the assessment that Foundation Scotland do before it goes to the panel is a pretty light touch one. So I'll only get in touch with you if I have particular queries, if something isn't clear. A lot of them I'll just rely on the information that is supplied in the application. The large awards, it's a two-stage process. So there's a shortlisting process. The panel will have a look at all the applications, and then it's only shortlisted applications that get a full assessment. Now, the shortlisting is done purely on the fit with the fund priorities. So particularly if you're putting in a larger grant application, being really clear about how you fit with the fund priorities is the crucial point, because that's what gets you through to the shortlisting. Shortlisted projects go through then quite a rigorous assessment process that's done either by me or one of my colleagues at Foundation Scotland. Occasionally we'll have external assessors in as well. And the assessments all get peer reviewed before they go to the panel. So the decision on awards, it's not my decision, it's the panel's decision. But I do the basic sort of technical checking, the due diligence side of things, and just make sure that the panel has hopefully got all the information they want. So in the assessment process, the things we look at, first and foremost, this fit with fund priorities. So this is when we're shortlisting, we've got to be really clear about that. So as Susan has already mentioned, there are these 4 fund priorities. So the first priority is about contribution to a climate smarter world. So essentially that is around moving towards a low carbon world, carbon reductions in all manner of ways. Now, some of the issues we sometimes face with projects is that when we read the application, that seems a bit of a bolt-on rather than a central aspect of the project, and therefore they fail to get shortlisted. So, for example, we've seen some applications for, say, a major community building refurbishment that runs into several £100,000, and we're asked for £15,000 from this fund. And the way the application is written is our money is just going into this bigger pot to do this building refurbishment. And the applicant often provides very good information about the value of this new community building, but actually then tells us very little about the specific environmental issues that are being addressed through our funding. So in that case, a better approach can be to put in an application specifically for the environmental aspects of the refurbishment. So rather than just us putting in a small amount of money into this big pot, actually being very specific and saying, we want your £15,000 to do X, Y, Z that will improve the energy efficiency. And that puts the climate smart objectives forefront rather than sort of hiding it away somewhere in the depth of the application. So that really helps an application to tick the box as being climate smart. Also, it's worth remembering that reducing carbon is not just about the direct impacts. We often see some really big indirect impacts, particularly when it comes to demonstrating how things can be done differently. So Andrew was just saying before we started this meeting, the electric vehicle in Old Meldrum gets a huge amount of attention. So it's not just the fact that that electric vehicle is saving diesel from the old style tractor. It's the fact that the population of Meldrum and far wider have noticed the fact that there's an electric vehicle and have said, oh, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know whether Andrew wants to comment, but I'm sure your volunteers have loads and loads of comments made to them about the vehicle. So it's that sort of thing that just raises awareness, so makes the impact a lot bigger than just the initial saving. Also in community buildings, the fact that community building has an air source heat pump will mean that the community who use that building have now actually seen an air source heat pump in action. And they're still quite new to a lot of us. So those sorts of impacts can really, really add to the direct impacts. So in your proposal, think about how you're going to let people know, because that can really magnify the sort of impacts the project has. So then the second priority is about community facilities, especially community spaces and transport. We've had a few debates around things like paths and whether path networks are community facilities. And on the whole, we've decided that, yes, they're community facilities, but if we were to invest in path networks, we'll have to have a clear rationale around them reducing car travel. So if it was a route where you could clearly evidence the fact that people were going to get out their cars and use a bike or walk, we could potentially do that. But if it's a recreational path that people are going to drive to, we wouldn't really see it fitting. Support creative solutions. As Susan mentioned, the wording of that has changed since we started. Originally, we termed it innovative solutions. But when people saw the word innovative, they assumed what we meant was technological innovation. That isn't necessarily the case. It just means a slightly different way of doing something. And that can be a new technology, but it can also be about things such as the FITI project that you'll hear about later, where they're engaging with the artistic community. Could be about behaviour change. There are a number of ways you can do things differently. It doesn't have to be technology. So the word creative is trying to get over the fact that we're not trying to constrain you in any way here. It's doing things differently. And we want to see a legacy and lasting impact of whatever we fund. As well as those priorities, there are some other things we look for. So particularly looking at the energy hierarchy, I was just watching the news before coming onto this call, and there was discussion about the new energy strategy that's just been published, and a lot of criticism that the energy hierarchy isn't being addressed in that. That, in other words, demand reduction isn't being addressed, because demand reduction needs to go hand in hand with producing energy from renewable sources. So we have had applications in for things such as solar panels or air source heat pumps in buildings that have very, very poor energy efficiency. And we felt it's been quite poor value for money to be investing in renewable technologies when the actual fabric of the building needs improvement. So that point's meant to get over that we need the balance between demand reduction and finding renewable generation options. We prefer local procurement if possible. Of course, it's not always possible. We absolutely appreciate at the moment buying most things is quite difficult, whoever from. We also like to see people working in partnership with other community organisations, capacity building locally. When it comes to leverage and match funding, there isn't an absolute requirement for match funding, but if our funding can help draw in other funding, that is a positive. And that was something in Cheryl's project that she'll talk about, where there was a definite positive there through the Vattenfall funding being able to lever in a considerable amount of other funding. And when it comes down to it, it's about quality of life for all. So it isn't entirely about carbon savings. It's also about the wider impacts these projects have on communities. So the first thing is, well, does the project fit with these fund priorities? And really that's the bit of the application that you've got to spend some time on and got to really get right, because the rest of this we can come back to when we're doing the assessment, and we can talk to you about if it's not clear. But to get to the shortlisting stage, it's the fit with fund priorities that needs to be right. So when we do the assessment, we have a phone call with you, or Zoom call or whatever, and we check through that we've understood the details in your application. And the things we'll be looking at are around organisational capacity. So your constitution, your accounts, if you're a registered charity or company, if you've got your filings up to date with Oscar and Companies House, we'll be looking at sort of skills you've got in delivering the project. We'll be looking at the evidence you have of need. So have you done any sort of community consultation? Is there duplication with other organisations? Quite a lot of the assessment actually looks at the detailed planning of the project. So for example, if it's a project involving a building, have you had any independent advice on what you're doing from an architect, or free advice through somebody such as the successor to Zero Waste Scotland? So that it's not that straightforward bringing in energy efficient measures and renewables into buildings. So have you made the right choice? What advice have you relied on? How have you come up with the costs? Our guidance asks you to get 3 quotes for items costing over £3,000. Now, at the moment, I know getting even 1 quote is an absolute nightmare. Getting 3 quotes is difficult. If you can't get 3 quotes, put in the application anyway, and just say that you're continuing to source quotes. Now, please then just try to get the quotes, and if you've got them by the assessment, you can share them with the assessor at that stage. But please don't hold back from putting in an application because you haven't been able to get the quotes. If at the assessment stage you're still struggling to get quotes, and some organisations have, if we approve it, we could look at some sort of conditional approval where you supply quotes later. So we recognise that quotes at the moment are difficult, so don't let that hold you back. We'll also look at other sources of funding. So have you got other sources of funding? So for example, Zero Waste Scotland used to have quite generous cashback schemes, which I think have been carried over to the new organisation. So have you made use of those sorts of things? If it's a large project where we're only supplying just part of the money, is there a credible plan for raising the rest of the money? Which brings me on to the next point about timescales and feasibility. When we approve projects, we like to see the money spent within the next 12 months. Over the past year, that has been slightly problematic. A lot of our projects have experienced delays, but generally we like to see projects ready to go in the next 12 months. If your project isn't likely to be ready in the next 12 months, we'd much prefer you apply next year, because this is a fund that is going to last for several years. So we don't want to be holding on to money when projects just aren't ready to start spending. So the assessor will look at the feasibility timescales. We'll just check whether any things like permissions are required, and that you've got things like adequate insurance in place. And crucially, well, what will the benefits and the impacts of your project be? Have you got any evidence of that? Is it that reasonable? So those are the sorts of things we look at in the assessment, and then we do a report for the panel, who then make the decisions on the application. Those projects that get awards, and last year we were very, very heavily oversubscribed. It's varied quite a lot. Last year we approved about 1/3 of the applications we had in. The year before it was about 1/2. So last year was a bumper year for applications, and I think that was partly because a lot of people had sort of held off the year before because they were tied up with pandemic-related things. This year, I don't really know what the level of applications is like, but the chances are we'll be oversubscribed. So the awards we make, there's a fairly standard set of terms and conditions that projects need to apply. And we ask that they spend within 12 months. But if things don't go to plan, we can extend that. But we like to be reasonably confident that things can start within 12 months. There are also some requirements about publicity, so just acknowledging your grant. There might be specific conditions as well, particularly around things like getting quotes if you haven't been able to get those. And we ask for a completion report when you're done that tells us a bit about what you've achieved and the impacts. And in this programme, because we're looking at long-term impacts, I will be doing longer-term follow-up just to get a few stories, a bit of qualitative information from people in the longer term to see the difference that's being made. Though that's not a contractual thing. I just hope that people will go along with that. So that's all from me, but of course, come back to me with questions at the end. But we thought it would be helpful for you to actually get the perspective of an applicant who's been through this process now 3 times, twice successfully, once unsuccessfully. So that's a reasonably good strike rate. So could I hand over to Cheryl from the Fitty Community Development Trust?
Hi there. Yes, I'm a trustee for the Fitty Community Development Trust, so a bit of a mouthful, but I just had that little subheading there about which is all about making Fitty Community Hub fit for the future. And I wish I'd never put that in there because it's quite a tongue twister. Anyway, if you could just move on to the next, which is a picture of the Gospel Hall and all the trustees outside. I don't know whether you can see it, but there's quite an elderly member of the community, and then to the right of her, the lady in the red jacket, there's a mother and child, which is to represent the youngest member of the community. Anyway, just to begin, this Gospel Hall, if you could see it there, was constructed in 1951, and I found this quote: "The most sustainable building is one that already exists," which I really liked, and it sort of suited the presentation. I saw it in the Observer when I was looking at stuff around COP26, and I thought, well, yes, I could understand that if you take an existing building, it's better than starting from scratch. So what the Fitty Community Development Trust did through community empowerment is buy this Gospel Hall. And this was preceded by the engagement of an architect, a quantity surveyor, who looked at the hall and set out plans for us and gave us also a blank breakdown of costs. This was just indicative cost, but I think it's useful that we had that information. And this was to look at the complete conversion of the Gospel Hall to a community building or space. So that's where we fit it into the application for community assistance. And why we went this route is because we were unsuccessful in obtaining lottery funding for the full thing. And having gone back to the residents and consulted, it was agreed that they wanted us to proceed. They wanted a community space, they wanted a community hub. They were right behind us, and if we had to do it in stages as the funding allowed, then that was all fine. What we had was phase 1, and dealing with COVID, which Bees alluded to along the way, took about 6 months, but we reopened again in June 2021. And now we're working on phase 2 of the works, which is started just recently and is expected to finish by the end of May, beginning of June. But anyway, that's the little overview, and I'll just say a bit more and then go on to the specifics of the application. So this is the environmental survey which Bees referred to. We did have that. We had it way back in October 2018, and the body then was called Energy Efficient Scotland. But they came to the building, and I imagine that whoever does that now, it would just be so useful for anyone embarking on this process to look at energy efficiency and look at measures that we could take to really improve everything about it, because it was just a shell really when we took it over. So internal insulation of the walls and ceiling, because so much heat potentially could go that way, through the floor as well, new heating system, new hot water, LED lighting are all recommended ways of reducing energy consumption and also CO2 emissions. So we were really fortunate that this sort of set us on a path, if you like. And as a result, as again Bea has mentioned, that what we focused on in terms of the heating system was an electrical air source heat pump, which produced essentially hot water that then fed in under the floor. And so it's hot water and heating via an air source heat pump. And so that was phase 1, and now we're working on phase 2, which is installing the insulation, some double glazing, and plus putting some flooring and LED lighting in. So that's the next one, I think. I just wanted to show you something about the work that we did around bringing the community with us and trying to sort of listen to what people wanted. And this is a picture of the hall before it was gone through phase 1, where people are looking at the architect's design. So we asked people about what they wanted to have in the hall. We had some community fundraising events, people signed up as members and so on. And you do have to indicate in the applications, who's involved as members and volunteers and so on. So it's something that we did work on right from the very first. And the trustees, of which I'm one, there's 6 of us, also started looking at opportunities to access grants since we didn't have the lottery funding. And we looked at where we could get money for capital projects, and also began commissioning and selling merchandise to help raise funds for the running of the hall. So just mentioned about communication with residents, and that we have a website and a very lively Fitty Folk Facebook page. We've gone absolutely mad on these little these little phrases, but anyway, the next one I think is, yeah, so this is just showing you on the right what the Gospel Hall had, which was a strange thing. A full baptismal font for adults is what that woman is looking down into, and then there was a pulpit and a sort of raised floor and the psalm at the back. So anyway, just now reflecting on the application. So the first application was made in the first round, and we made it essentially for this heat pump, for the electric air-to-water heat pump, which had been recommended by the architect who'd seen it operating well in other settings. And we looked at the questions, and we did do quite a lot of research on this. We also went to the place in George Street, where I haven't mentioned it here, but there's somewhere in George Street where they had the opportunity to ask people questions about applying, because it's the first year of operation. So legacy and lasting impact for the community, fit for the future and environmentally sustainable, and contributing to the climate smarter world, and innovation we did feel we could respond to, and we did it on the basis of the application, on the basis of that. I didn't mention it, but at some point there was in the old hall some like gas sort of coming into it, but we did decide right at the beginning, when we did want to go to the electrical route, so we could take advantage of renewables and so on. And I think I seem to remember putting that into the application right at the beginning. And also mentioned about the community involvement. And yeah, it was great to have this space under the floor where we could put all these heating pipes. And we did just take advantage of that. And so that was our first application, which was successful. So on to the next one, second application. And as they say, you probably learn most by your mistakes. And this was not successful. We needed to make an application and felt to go to Vattenfall for insulation, since this would make the energy coming into the hall more efficient. This is the external walls. There was really nothing between just the sort of brickwork, if you like, or it's really like stone concrete blocks. And so we really wanted to get the insulation in place, but we weren't successful. And we then tried to understand why, which was very helpful. And we talked to Bea about it, and she said, and we absolutely took it on board, that it was a good application, but not good enough given the competition, because I think there had been a ramping up of numbers of applicants, probably between the first round of applications and the second. The thing was then that we hadn't put it down as matched funding, which in the first instance we had, because we had some money from Suez, which we could match with the Vattenfall money when we looked at the air source heat pump. So we had £8,000 or thereabouts from Vattenfall, and I think it was about 17 from Suez, who they're sort of around, they have funding for those areas that are close to landfill of all places. But anyway, there was match funding. And in the first instance, we felt that the air source heat pump was innovative for a community space and hadn't been used before in our experience. So we were able to answer these questions. In the second instance, I just didn't think we did. But we did have good points in the application, which we thought we could retain. As I've mentioned, we could talk about the Fitty diaspora, because there are lots of people that grew up in Fitty, but as you probably know, it was always quite a densely populated area, and many families have gone away to other parts of Aberdeen, but you know, they still have relatives in Fitty, and also is an area which attracts many visitors. So we were looking at the impact, you know, slightly beyond the existing residents, and trying to see how that would make the application more viable, because more impact would be created by having the hall for a variety of purposes. Anyway, so there we are, reflected on what was missing and on the good points, but we just needed to try again because of the large electricity bills that we were getting, frankly, from this pump, which was belting out heat, which was going through the ceiling and the walls. But then I have a little image here, and I wanted to say that, of course, doing your yoga in the winter was absolutely fantastic in the hall, because all the heat comes up through that floor. It's absolutely wonderful. But anyway, on to application 3, which is the recent one. last April, we attended the equivalent session to this one, and we set our sights on trying once again to obtain funding for insulation and for the double glazed windows. And this is through a conversation with the builder, we understood that we had to just do these things at once. So it was going to be more money, but we did know that we could bring in local firms. If you know Fitty, actually it's in sort of backed by quite a lot of industrial units. So there are people doing double glazing who would supply estimates and quotations. So we were able to get the full range of quotations, people coming to the hall. So that we were actually quite assiduous on that, and felt that would help the capacity building for the local area. And when we came to look at the application, and I should say that I'm a total non-digital person, actually it was really easy to fill in, but you have to look at the template and you have to see how all that you want to say fits in the appropriate boxes, because there's only a limited number of words in each area. So absolutely great to be able to use that electronic system, and also to get advice as you're trying to complete it. So we felt we could demonstrate that we had matched or leveraged funding, because on this occasion we had money promised from Garfield Weston, which was 10k towards the building in a general kind of way, if we could raise another 23k. And so, as they say, do the maths. I did the maths, and we got an application into the Robertson Trust for 8,000, so applied to Vattenfall for 15, and so that once we had that 23,000, we could ask Garfield Weston for their 10. So it was meeting that matched aspect, which we had not done in the second one. And then we alluded to this fact that the wording in the first was innovation, but this had changed to sort of supporting creativity. And this, we were very fortunate, came at a time when we had entered into a partnership with something called the Culture Collective. And this was funded by Creative Scotland. So this is a company called Open Road, had got some funding for what they call creative practitioners. And they also had discussed bringing in creative practitioners with a knowledge of environmental areas, and their environment and sustainability was one of their main themes, including looking at Aberdeen's transition from a city dependent on oil or gas to more sustainable ways, for other energies, maybe a centre for renewables, an energy centre more generally. And so we have felt this would definitely enhance our capacity to address the agenda around climate change, and give people that the community hub serves a chance to think about how they could act individually and together to help address those issues. And yeah, we were successful this time. So that's really the story of our applications, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cheryl. That was great to have a bit more of that. Let me stop sharing this so we can go on to Q&A. So over to Susan.
Yes, so I don't think there has been any, or in the chat, I can't see the chat. But yes, if anyone's got any questions, if you can put a hand up, or we can try and answer it just now, or you can see one. George, do you want to start us off?
Yes, please. Hi, thanks for that, Jill. It's interesting to hear your journey. One of the things that you mentioned in it is about community consultation. Now, it's quite a science in itself. And I wondered, and I know that Fitty is quite a small and discreet community where a lot of people already know each other. It's got that identity. How did you carry out that community consultation? Did you do it kind of in-house yourselves, or did you have external expertise to help you do it, and what were the costs of it?
You're on mute, Cheryl. You're on mute. On. Cheryl, you're on mute.
Unmute.
Oh,
Apologies, George. No, what I was saying was that we didn't have any bring any expertise or consultants, but I suppose we were lucky in our trustees because we had somebody who originally worked for Aberdeen City Council on the sort of social work and sort of well-being side, a former teacher, and somebody who was like a research assistant in university, and very I would say very articulate person who actually did a lot of work around a business plan. So I think you know, you do have to have people who are happy to put things down on paper. We did a lot of sending around of newsletters. We invited people into the hall. You know, I showed you that picture of people clustered around various boards for the architects, looking at architects' plans and the gardening plans. So there was a lot of, I suppose, yeah, also informal discussions about things. And we were also able, I think, to draw on the actual builder that was working with us, who was actually very creative, and he lives in the community. So we're always kind of feel answerable to the people on our doorsteps and try and say this, what's going on. But yeah, we actually do a lot of physical dropping newsletters through every single letterbox. And the stuff on Facebook, which I would really recommend, but I'm not a Facebook user, so I say being non-digital, I can't comment on it. But there is this sort of fitty folk thing, and that's where you can see what's going on in the hall. So yes, we kind of muddled along, but I think that we have sort of brought people with us, and the people on the Culture Collective and on the creative project are really amazing, and they do all sorts of things, you know, podcasts and sessions in the hall, installations, art installations, all sorts. I've sent some to B, but you know, they've really taken things to a different level, and they do have a press officer. So we've gone from kind of doing it ourselves in that initial stage for the application to having some professional expertise from them who hope, and they can hopefully do more about explaining how the building is demonstrating what we're trying to do around climate change and to address that.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, I warbled on too much.
I'm sorry. So I saw Jack had his hand up as next.
Hello, Cheryl. That was an excellent presentation. My question is, when you looked for extra funding, did you research that yourself, or did you get help from Foundation Scotland for match funding?
No, the match, well, the funding sources, there are quite a lot of bits of information. People, I think it was mentioned about the Aberdeen City voluntary organisation, AVCO, and there's also something called DTAS. So if you're a development trust, they have very regular newsletters about all sorts of funding and what's available to you. So we actually did, you know, ourselves look at quite a lot of information and start applying. I mean, there is no substitute. We weren't always successful, but we did look out for grant sources for capital funds specifically, and we just kept applying. I mean, there's no other way really, but you can certainly get information from those two places, from the from DTAS, which looks after all the development trusts, and from other from the Aberdeen City charitable organisation.
Yeah,
Is that the AVA you're talking about?
I'm talking about AVCO, yes. AACVO, isn't it? Aberdeen
yes,
City
that would be Aberdeen
Voluntary
City,
Organisation.
but
You
AVA
mentioned
is
it.
the Aberdeenshire one.
Thank you.
So those are the third sector interface organisations. So there's one for Aberdeen and one for Aberdeenshire. There's also a very good funding database called Funding Scotland that you can search the sources of funding in. SCVO run that one. So yes, there are a lot of other sources of advice on funding. Foundation Scotland, we can provide a certain amount of signposting, but we're not really a service for accessing other sources of funding. So yes, I'd point you in the direction of definitely the TSIs, DTAS and Funding Scotland on those.
Thank you.
So Jack, do you want to?
Yeah, I think this is a question for you. I'm not actually seeing the chat function on at the bottom. I wonder if you've got it switched off. Is anyone else seeing the chat?
It would be do you know? Because I can't see a chat.
Oh, that's interesting. I can't see it either. I must have done something strange on the settings, I'm afraid. Let me see whether I can switch it on. Did you have something you particularly wanted to?
Well, one question I had was for a smaller grant and getting a quote for the work. Was it just one quote that you required?
If it's under £2,000,
yeah.
Yes, just one quote that can be something like just a something off a website. Doesn't have to be a formal quote from a supplier. It can just be off a price list, but under £2,000.
Great.
Has anyone else got any questions for Bea or myself or Cheryl?
Susan, I've got a question. Sorry, it's Guy here. Is there just one round per year? That's it?
There is, yes. The panel have discussed a second round, but actually because we're oversubscribed anyway, it just seems simpler to have the one.
So if you're not quite ready, I mean, we are. I'm going to be pushed to be ready for the 28th of April, but I don't want to wait for next year. So I presume I could put one in with there are bits missing that you could pick. You know, would that be acceptable?
Yes, just if there are bits missing, say what's missing, and
I can do that.
continuing to chase those. And if it's a larger grant, when we do the assessment, we can fill in the missing bits.
Okay, that's fine.
Thanks. Does anyone else have any questions?
Can I just say, Bea, it was good to get a reminder of all the priorities to get that right. I found it very useful.
Thank you.
Okay, well, obviously, if anyone does have any questions later, they can email Bea, and we can try and answer them.
Or if you'd like to set up a meeting with me to discuss your project, please just drop me an email. I normally work Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays. Can do evenings if that suits you better. My availability over the next couple of weeks is reasonably good. So just give me a few slots and we can have a chat.
So yeah, so we're looking forward to seeing all the applications this year. And thanks again for coming tonight.
And I'll circulate the slides to everybody.
Thanks, Bea.
Thank you very
And
much.
thanks very much, Cheryl, for
Thank you.
coming and presenting as well.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.